Thomas, you have had 4 near-death experiences over the course of your life. Let's start with the first one. How did it come about and what did you experience? My first near-death experience was in Berlin when I was 9 years old at the time, and I had a goldfish bowl that didn't contain any real fish. There were actually images projected into the water in the bowl. They were electronically projected. And this particular bowl had lifelike images of prehistoric crabs in it, and I wanted to take a closer look at them. So I put the bowl on the floor, and as a little boy, I lay down next to it and looked into the bowl. It was only a few feet away from the electric socket, and my father had told me several times, make sure you don't get too close to the socket with the water. It's dangerous. And when he then went down to the cellar where his study was, he said again, make sure not to get too close to the socket with the water and your fingers. Well, what did I do? I put my hand in the bowl of water and thereafter into the socket. Bang! Well, then I passed out, and suddenly there were lots of light beings around me. They looked like glowing candles, and from inside them a warmth was emanating that I can't describe, simply because it's indescribable. In any case, however, I was told, not through speech but telepathically, that I needn't be afraid and that I was allowed to go back because it was far too early for me to die. And that's exactly what happened. Shortly afterwards, I regained consciousness and I found myself lying on the floor with my father somehow shaking me. Maybe he thought that it was because of the shaking that I came back to life. But for me, I don't know exactly what the real reason was for this, but this was the first near-death experience. Can you describe these light columns in a little more detail? Yes, they were rather bluish from the outside inwards, very similar to a flame, bluish, and inside they became brighter and brighter. But in this cone of light, there was still a human-like structure to be recognized. So it looked human, but without a face, nor hands or feet, although it seemed as if there were arms and legs. How did the second near-death experience come about? I had my second near-death experience when I was 15 years old. I was in a swimming pool with classmates, and we used to think it was great to dive through each other's legs, and we also thought it was better to do it not just once, but 2 or even 3 times, all in a row. Well, I had a classmate who liked to have a bit of fun. What I didn't know about, of course, was when I was diving through his legs for the second time around, he pressed his legs together, and I couldn't get out. I panicked and opened my mouth wide, of course, trying to scream. I can't say how long this lasted. Anyway, at some point, I passed out again. And these cones of light, these light columns, appeared around me again. And this situation was similar to the one in my first experience, because I was told again that I needn't be afraid and that everything was fine. And I wasn't afraid this time either. Also, because I remembered how it was the first time, when I also had come back. So I felt good, completely without fear, and I knew that I would come back this time too. And when I saw the lifeguard next to the pool resuscitating me, I regained consciousness. Did you still see yourself from outside in this state of being, or were you simply present in this space where these light columns were? I didn't see myself from outside during this near-death experience, and during the first experience, not during that one either. And this space, it was very bright as you could imagine heaven to be, and as you can imagine heaven full of angels. Well, maybe there were angels, I don't know for sure. I say light beings because angels, as I learned at school, have wings, and these beings didn't have wings, but the warmth emanating from them was really heavenly. You told me about a third near-death experience that you had. Yes, I was 27 years old when I had the third near-death experience, and it was already quite some time after the fall of the Berlin Wall that I was just about to move from the west to the former east part of Berlin. And in the bathroom of the new apartment, there was no illuminated mirrored bathroom cabinets. So we had purchased a new one, and my father was about to install this new mirrored cabinet. My father was standing on the ladder. I had already drilled the holes before, and he was about to connect the mirror cabinet to the electricity. With one hand, I held the ladder. With the other, I held onto the sink. And as my father was about to plug it into the power supply, I got such an electric shock that I flew out through the open door of the bathroom, then crashed into a wall right in the back, whereupon I again passed out. But this time it was all different. I was so frightened when I found myself suddenly being swept out of my body, then looking down on it from above. And it was the first time for me to experience this. I heard my father shouting for my wife, "Get a cold cloth." And when she went into the kitchen, I followed her, as a ghost, so to speak. You see, I accompanied her. My soul, or whatever, I don't know. But I accompanied her into the kitchen, seeing how she quickly got a cold cloth and then came back, and how my father then put the cold cloth on my head. I saw all of this. Also, how my father, still there on earth, was shouting at her as to what she should do. But suddenly it was quiet again, and whoosh, I was again back up on the ceiling. This time, however, everything was much more intense. This time it felt for me as if I was walking on little cotton balls, as if I was lying snuggled up into clouds, and this time there were more light columns. There were much more of them around me. Then it was as if they all together were speaking to me with just one voice. So I was again told, "It's not yet your time. You don't need to be afraid, even though it was bad this time. But you can go back and live a normal life again." So I came back, but oh dear, I found myself back in my body, unable to move or speak, but my eyes were open. I only heard my father calling, "Oh, thank goodness, he's back now, he's back." And when he asked me something, I wanted to speak, but there was no sound coming out. Everything was kind of paralyzed. Whereupon I started crying. I panicked because I couldn't speak, and my father saw my tears. It took a long time until the emergency doctor finally arrived, and only then I was slowly able to speak again. But it was only fragments of words. I think I wasn't able to speak proper sentences until the next day, and therefore this was my worst experience. You said that first you were outside your body, looking down on yourself, right? And then in a second phase, you were back in this white space. Right, but I don't know why it happened that way this time, so I can't say why. Anyway, it was a strange feeling looking down on yourself. So I then thought, that's it, now I'm dead. Whereas I didn't think that way during the first two experiences. And because it was different this time, I thought, I'm probably dead now. Did you still perceive yourself as having a body when you were a spirit standing outside your body? Yes, but I didn't feel any weight. I was as light as air. And when I looked at my arms and legs, when I was floating above myself, I just thought, well, I'm dead now. And that's the way it is. Too bad, my dear father, my dear child, my dear wife. So I just thought, now it's over. In the out of body state, your appearance was human. Yes, I had the same human appearance. I even was wearing the same clothes. I wasn't naked, I was wearing the same clothes. Thomas, how did the fourth near death experience come about? The fourth experience was on January 11th of 2000. And since then, I used to say that I was born for the second time on this day. At that time, I was working for the police in Berlin, and I was on police business. And I was driving on the city highway, the A100 for people who might know it, and there I was rammed from behind by an 18-year-old who was trying to reach the highway exit I was driving towards. Thereupon my car was pushed forward, then it was pushed sideways, then it was pushed sideways into the other lanes, where I collided with lots of cars while flying across 6 lanes, and thereafter, also having reached the opposite lane, I still continued playing billiards, so to speak. And for this first time in my life, I really did see my life flash before my eyes, very briefly and in time lapse, exactly as people always say, but I had never experienced it before. But now I really saw a very brief outline of it, and this within a very brief period of time. And this time, when I was up there, it was all different. All these light columns, or light beings, were again there, but everything was brighter. And this time, they didn't say, "Don't worry," or anything like that. This time they said, "Welcome, you're now home." However, I hadn't expected this at all. I did not want to do so, and I said, "No, I have a 4-year-old son. I cannot leave him alone with my wife." So I asked, just simply with the courage to leave a few gaps, for the permission to go back to Earth again, because I could not die yet, as my wife could not manage it alone with my son. This was then possible, and the corresponding permission was not long in coming. So they said, "If this is your desire, you can go back again, because your body is still intact and has not yet been burned." And I then returned to my body, but this time in severe pain and inside a burning car. So at that moment, I doubted whether it had been wise to ask for the permission to return. But meanwhile, lots of people arrived with fire extinguishers trying to extinguish the fire. Meanwhile, the fire brigade had also arrived, and they were welding the car door open, and I was lifted out of the car along with the seat. I was given a neck brace and was taken to hospital, where I was diagnosed with a broken neck and 7 slipped discs. I was even paralyzed. Physically, I was so severely impaired that I was temporarily confined to a wheelchair. How long did it take you to recover? 6 months. It really took me half a year before I was able to return to the police service. Even after my return, I was still being treated for my back pain, and I was receiving treatment up until 3 years ago. And now it has become better. It's better now because I've been given other medication. Now I have been approved for cannabis because of the severe pain. But this actually was even before 3 years ago. I received cannabis in the form of droplets because it's easier to dose. I no longer have any pain at all now. During this 4th near-death experience, you were suddenly back in this white, bright room? Yes, that's right, without having observed the accident any further. Right, but this time it all was different from the 3 previous experiences. This time there were even still more people. Oh, what am I saying? People, I mean, even still more light beings there. And I thought that maybe these were relatives who had died before me. And this time I was welcomed. I was welcomed with, "Now you've made it. Welcome. Now you're home." That's what they were saying. And I replied, "I don't want to. I'm sorry. Thank you for the honor. But I don't want to die yet. I have a 4-year-old son and a wife at home. I don't want to leave them alone." They then said, "If this is your wish, then you can go back." So after your 4th near-death experience, you developed a type of exceptional talent. How does this express itself? I came to it by a coincidence. I'm a psychologist, so I used to talk to people, and once when I took part in a seminar where I was watching people, but I don't always just look at the eyes, but also at something else, such as their hands. And I realized that when I was looking into people's hearts, suddenly certain images appeared. First, I was startled and couldn't do anything about it. During the break, I told this to the lady concerned. asking her if I was allowed to look at her heart, because I had perceived something strange about her previously. And with her permission, I looked at the lady's heart. So I took a piece of paper because I saw lots of pictures or symbols and other things that I couldn't relate to. Things like a horse, a fish, a year, or whatever. I just wrote it all down on a piece of paper. Thereafter, I gave the sheet with my notes to this lady, and she immediately burst into tears because these numbers and symbols immediately meant something to her. Really, all of them. And I thought, this is really crazy. I'm experiencing this for the first time because I didn't know before that such a thing even existed. So from this time on, I have been able to look into the heart of every person and see what's going on with them. How do these images appear before you? How should we imagine it? Well, imagine I would have a camera in front of my eye through which I suddenly see an image. For example, if I were to look at you now like this, I would, well, it doesn't work from screen to screen. I would have to be directly in front of a person. Well, maybe I would see a bird, a canary, or any other bird. Sometimes I see things very real. So I might say, a yellow bird with a pointed beak. Some other time, I might just see outlines. In this case, I would just note bird. Then you might say, I once had a budgie that flew away and never came back, and this was a traumatic experience for me. This is just an example. I myself can never make much sense of these images. Sometimes I just see grimaces. Then I write, evil grimace, could be the devil. And if I can't recognize anything, I try to draw it as it appears to me. I see them before my eyes. And if I don't recognize them, I just draw on a piece of paper what I see. Looking back, what impact did all these experiences have on your worldview? It was tremendous. I had been brought up as a Christian back then, but during puberty and early adulthood, I didn't necessarily think about God every day. Sure, I preferred playing football and table tennis and running after women. But after these experiences, especially after the last one, I came back very intensely to faith and to God. So I'm now working in the church. Back then, I had been trained as a pastor and as an assistant in the German Red Cross crisis intervention help. And I feel much, much better now. I can't say why. I'm not afraid of death anyway after these 4 near death experiences, but I see people with different eyes now. I try to see the good in everyone. What I say now may be difficult to understand. That is, that I love all people. In any case, I try to do so. Even if people are aggressive or bad, I try to treat them with love. For 4 years, I have also been working with disabled children, with autistic children, and it's certainly also due to my experiences that I am socially committed. So I sing for disabled children in the club Music Brings Smiles. We also sing in hospices, and this is another charitable activity for the benefit of people. And all of this makes me feel so good. So you have been convinced through these near-death experiences that there is life after death. 100%. Thank you very much for the interview, and a big thanks to you also.